What if the most intimidating and feared wrestler in the annals of the sport was actually one of the most beloved figures in the locker room? Yes, we are discussing a man who relentlessly maintained his character for 30 years and underwent 17 different surgeries simply to ensure that every match he had was absolutely perfect. So, how in the world did a wrestler who had such an abysmal start to his career transform into the most revered superstar in the company's history? Well, to truly understand the man known as the Undertaker, we need to take a momentary step back. Let's journey back to March 24th, 1965, which is when Mark William Calaway was born in the vast city of Houston, Texas. He happened to be the youngest of 5 brothers in his family, reaching an imposing height of 6'10" while still in high school. Mark was a commanding presence in both basketball and football at Waltrip High. His remarkable size and athletic prowess earned him basketball scholarships, initially to Angelina College and then to Texas Wesleyan University, where he was a star player for the Rams during the 1985 to 1986 season. The universal expectation was that he would continue his basketball career after college. But as it turned out, the world of wrestling had a different plan for him. He had been a devoted fan since he was a young boy, and in the latter part of 1986, he began training under the guidance of the veteran wrestler Buzz Sawyer. His first major break occurred in world-class championship wrestling, where he concealed his identity with a mask and took on the character of Texas Red. His very first match was a defeat at the hands of the legendary Bruiser Brody, with Percy Pringle, a man who would later have a monumental impact on his career, serving as his manager. Mark then transitioned to the Continental Wrestling Association, where the experienced Dutch Mantel took the young prospect under his wing. It was there that he experimented with a variety of characters, such as the Master of Pain and the Punisher. Success arrived swiftly for him. Portraying the Master of Pain, he triumphed over Jerry Lawler for the USWA World title, and as the Punisher, he captured the WCWA Texas title from Eric Embry. Even though he was a relative newcomer to wrestling, Mark conducted himself like a seasoned veteran, earning the deep respect of everyone and quickly developing a reputation as someone who could always be relied upon inside the ring. His growing renown opened a path to World Championship Wrestling in 1990, where he reinvented himself as Mean Mark Callis, embracing a more sinister and mysterious persona. This character, as famously described by the legendary announcer Jim Ross, was presented as an enigmatic figure with a notable appreciation for Ozzy Osbourne's music and a collection of exotic snakes. This new creative direction ultimately led to a partnership with Dan Spivey, and together they formed the imposing tag team known as the Skyscrapers. The duo wasted no time in making their presence felt, especially during their highly memorable feud with the iconic Road Warriors. However, his time in WCW took a sharp and unexpected downturn when Ole Anderson, the promotion's head booker, flatly told him that he would never draw a single dime in the wrestling business. My, how incredibly wrong he was. Instead of surrendering to that criticism, Mark continued to work diligently while quietly orchestrating his exit strategy. During this phase of his career, he secured a small role in Hulk Hogan's movie Suburban Commando, a part that would turn out to be enormously significant. Hogan recognized his vast potential and began actively lobbying for the rival wrestling promotion to sign him. As soon as his WCW contract concluded, he arranged a meeting with Vince McMahon. Remarkably, the chairman of the federation initially displayed very little excitement about this future icon. Nevertheless, this initial skepticism completely faded away as McMahon got to know the performer better, which resulted in a contract offer and the development of what was destined to become one of the most legendary characters in wrestling history. The final creation was The Undertaker, a cryptic mortician from the depths of Death Valley who was impervious to pain and would place his vanquished opponents inside body bags. Now, it might seem obvious today that the Undertaker character would be a massive success, But back then, the majority of outlandish wrestling gimmicks failed miserably. What set this apart was his unwavering and complete dedication to the role. He even workshopped the character at smaller shows under the name Kane the Undertaker before his massive debut at Survivor Series on November 22nd. Making his entrance alongside Brother Love to that haunting music, he created an immediate and unforgettable impact, annihilating Koko B. Ware with his tombstone piledriver and then also taking out the legendary Dusty Rhodes. He dominated every single person who crossed his path, terrifying audiences every time he emerged from the darkness. Brother Love's tenure as his manager was quite brief. Instead, he was reunited with Percy Pringle, who is now portraying the eerie character of Paul Bearer. Bearer clutched a mysterious urn that was said to be the source of the Undertaker's incredible supernatural powers. The next spring ushered in WrestleMania on March 24, 1991. Where he would begin what would grow into a fabled undefeated streak by defeating Superfly Jimmy Snuka with his signature tombstone finisher. After that, a major program with the Ultimate Warrior was on the horizon, but it concluded prematurely when Warrior departed the company. Yet absolutely nothing could slow down the momentum of the Dead Man. Even though he was technically presented as a villain, the fans were undeniably starting to cheer for him. They simply couldn't resist being impressed by his aura and power. In a stunning moment at the 1991 Survivor Series, he shocked the entire world by defeating Hulk Hogan for the championship, although he would lose the title just days later due to interference from Ric Flair. Simply defeating Hogan was a clear signal of how much the company believed in its emerging superstar. The following year proved to be even more momentous. At WrestleMania 8, he extended his perfect record by defeating Jake the Snake Roberts so decisively that Jake would leave the company for the next 4 years. This very feud was what transitioned the Dead Man into a fan favorite for the first time, a move the audience adored. But the journey ahead wasn't entirely smooth. For a stretch of time, the company consistently booked him against very large men, who unfortunately were not very skilled wrestlers. Since his character was required to perform in an almost robotic manner and never sell any pain, these matches often failed to be very compelling. He competed against individuals like Kamala and Giant Gonzalez, barely scraping by with a win over Gonzalez by disqualification at WrestleMania 9 in 1993. It certainly wasn't the creative high point of his career, but through it all, he just kept on winning. His career trajectory took a significant upward turn when he entered a major rivalry with the massive Yokozuna, which all culminated in a thrilling casket match at the 1994 Royal Rumble. Despite losing the bout, the spectacle concluded with his character's enigmatic ascension into the arena's rafters, an incredibly creative storyline device designed to grant him necessary time away to recover from a nagging back injury. This recovery period resulted in him being absent from WrestleMania for the very first time in his career, with his anticipated comeback not occurring until that year's SummerSlam. Upon his return, he was immediately thrust into a peculiar and memorable angle where Ted DiBiase claimed to have brought back The Undertaker, presenting an imposter portrayed by Mark's real-life friend, Brian Lee. Simultaneously, the backstage political landscape was becoming just as captivating as the in-ring action. While a notorious faction known as the Clique, comprised of Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Triple H, and Sean Waltman, wielded considerable influence backstage, The Undertaker established his own respected inner circle, famously known as the Bone Street Crew. This loyal group featured a lineup of tough-as-nails performers, including Yokozuna, Savio Vega, Charles Wright, the Godwins, and Rikishi. By this stage of his career, The Undertaker had earned such immense locker room respect that even the powerful and often disruptive Clique knew better than to cross him. His authority was solidified when he took on the role of judge in the infamous Wrestler's Court, an unofficial backstage system where performers settled their disputes when someone violated the locker room's unwritten code of conduct. Away from the squared circle, Mark Calaway was also building a personal life, marrying his first wife, Jody Lynn, and together they welcomed their first child, a son named Gunnar. In parallel, his on-screen persona was undergoing a significant transformation, evolving from a chilling, slow-moving mortician into a far more commanding and supernatural force. He became a gothic spectacle, a sorcerer-like figure who could summon lightning and command the arena's lighting grid with a simple, deliberate gesture. This updated and more dynamic version of the character proved instrumental in maintaining his main event status and continuing his incredible run of success. At WrestleMania 11 in April of 1995, he defeated the formidable King Kong Bundy, extending his now famous undefeated streak. Soon after, a legitimate orbital bone injury forced him to don a phantom-like protective mask. Yet he courageously wrestled on, continuing his long-standing feud against Ted DiBiase's group. Towards the end of 1995, he transitioned squarely back into the main event scene, setting up a blockbuster confrontation with Diesel at WrestleMania 12, where he triumphed once again, pushing his record to a perfect 5-0 at the big show. However, the landscape shifted dramatically the very next evening with the shocking debut of Mankind. This new, deranged adversary was unlike any opponent he had faced before, managing to gain a psychological and physical advantage over the Phenom on several occasions. Their heated feud escalated to a brutal, boiler room brawl at SummerSlam 1996, where Mankind not only emerged victorious, but also orchestrated Paul Bearer's stunning betrayal against The Undertaker. For the very first time in his career, the dead man appeared genuinely vulnerable. And this deeply personal rivalry would reach an even more intense peak at the next pay-per-view. Titled Buried Alive in October 1996, the two competed in the inaugural Buried Alive match. Although he was literally buried under mounds of dirt that night, in true keeping with his supernatural persona, the dead man would not remain interred for long. He made a dramatic return just a few weeks later at Survivor Series, now sporting a more demonic, leather-clad appearance as the intimidating Lord of Darkness. After finally vanquishing his nemesis, Mankind, he confidently redirected his focus towards the most prestigious prize in the entire industry. In early 1997, following a controversial finish to that year's Royal Rumble, The Undertaker secured a championship opportunity against the imposing Psycho Sid at WrestleMania 13. On that historic night, he not only captured his second world championship, but also, impressively, extended his WrestleMania streak to a perfect 6 wins and 0 losses. What followed would become arguably the most iconic and defining storyline of his entire career. A vindictive pallbearer re-emerged, demanding to be reinstated as the new champion's manager. When The Undertaker flatly refused the offer, Bearer resorted to blackmail, threatening to expose a deeply buried and traumatic secret from his past if he did not comply with his wishes. This sinister threat laid the foundation for one of the most elaborate and successful long-term stories the company has ever produced. The champion grudgingly allowed Bearer back into his corner, but the constant psychological manipulation eventually became too much to bear, leading The Undertaker to once again sever their toxic partnership. It was at this breaking point that Bearer unleashed his ultimate bombshell. The Undertaker's long-lost brother, Kane, was not only alive, but was now on a path for brutal revenge. This was the absolute epitome of professional wrestling melodrama, a true masterclass in sports entertainment storytelling. For several months, Bearer relentlessly taunted The Undertaker, warning of Kane's imminent arrival and revealing the tragic backstory of a childhood fire allegedly started by The Undertaker, which killed their parents and left Kane horrifically scarred. As this deeply personal and haunting narrative unfolded, the dead man continued to fulfill his duties, successfully defending his world title throughout the spring and summer months. The immense psychological pressure, however, finally took its toll, contributing to him losing the championship belt to Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1997. Matters escalated and grew even more intense when he entered a bitter feud with Shawn Michaels, which would culminate in the very first Hell in a Cell match at the In Your House event. That October pay-per-view, titled Bad Blood, featured a match that is still considered one of the greatest in history, showcasing to the world that Mark Calaway was an exceptionally gifted in-ring performer when given the opportunity. But just as The Undertaker was on the verge of victory, the menacing figure of Kane made his long-awaited, terrifying debut, interfering and costing his brother the hard-fought win. Kane's shocking arrival cast a dark shadow over The Undertaker, as his monstrous brother and Paul Bearer relentlessly demanded a one-on-one confrontation, a challenge The Undertaker steadfastly refused, vowing he would never raise a hand against his own flesh and blood. In response, Kane unleashed his uncontrollable fury on the rest of the roster, leaving a path of destruction that included brutal assaults on both Mankind and Vader. For a fleeting moment, a reconciliation between the brothers seemed possible. While D-Generation X was tormenting The Undertaker, Kane appeared to save him, leading everyone to believe the deeply personal family conflict had at last been resolved. However, this heartwarming moment of unity was nothing more than an elaborate and cruel deception. At the Royal Rumble, during The Undertaker's intense casket match against Shawn Michaels, Kane shockingly turned on his brother yet again. He not only ensured his brother's defeat, but proceeded to lock him inside the casket and shockingly set it ablaze. Of course, this being The Undertaker, he would miraculously survive the seemingly fatal inferno. Following a mysterious absence that lasted several weeks, he re-emerged just before WrestleMania 14, poised to deliver a definitive and powerful message. The time for refusal was over. He would finally go to war with his brother on the grandest stage of them all. At WrestleMania, The Undertaker confronted what was arguably his most formidable opponent to date, his brother, Kane. Despite the immense challenge, he secured the victory by delivering a stunning 3 tombstone piledrivers, extending his undefeated streak to a remarkable 7-0. However, their intense conflict was far from resolved. The very next month, the two titans clashed in the company's inaugural Inferno match, a bout from which The Undertaker once again emerged victorious. Following that fiery encounter, Kane set his sights on pursuing Steve Austin's coveted championship title, which allowed The Undertaker to reignite his long-standing and bitter rivalry with Mankind. This renewed feud culminated in one of professional wrestling's most jaw-dropping and unforgettable moments, which occurred at the King of the Ring event inside the terrifying Hell in a Cell structure. The match shockingly began atop the massive steel cage, where The Undertaker horrifyingly hurled Mankind from the edge, causing him to plummet 16 feet and shatter an announce table below. The absolute mayhem didn't stop there, as later in the match, he executed a devastating chokeslam that sent Mankind crashing right through the roof of the cell itself. With that brutal chapter closed, the Phenom then turned his full attention toward the reigning champion, the one and only Stone Cold Steve Austin. The situation took a fascinating turn when the two adversaries were compelled to form an unlikely alliance and capture the tag team championships, all while on a collision course for their main event title bout at SummerSlam on August 30th. All semblance of cooperation vanished as they vied for the ultimate prize. In the build-up to this epic confrontation, it appeared that The Undertaker had at last reconciled with his brother Kane. Although Kane refrained from interfering in the contest, which Austin ultimately won, it became abundantly clear in the aftermath that the two brothers had genuinely joined forces once more. However, by the time October rolled around, the entire landscape shifted dramatically once again. In a shocking betrayal, The Undertaker turned his back on Kane, realigned himself with his sinister manager Paul Bearer, and made the horrifying confession that he was responsible for their parents' deaths. His persona underwent a complete metamorphosis, evolving into a chilling, dark priest who presided over his followers from a menacing throne at the head of a faction known as the Ministry of Darkness. This malevolent group counted among its members the Acolytes, the Brood, Midian, Viscera, and even the Big Show. The Ministry's narrative arc intensified significantly in 1999, when The Undertaker targeted none other than Vince McMahon himself. In a storyline that deliberately blurred the lines between reality and performance, he launched a campaign to seize control of the company, prompting Vince to publicly claim he was getting lost in his own gimmick. The conflict escalated dramatically as the dead man began to systematically terrorize every single member of the McMahon family. The proceedings took an even more macabre turn when he symbolically hanged the Big Boss Man from the cell at WrestleMania 15. This act occurred during a Hell in a Cell match that advanced his undefeated streak to 8-0, although it is a contest many fans would prefer to erase from memory. Later, he attempted to coerce Stephanie McMahon into an unholy matrimony during a deeply unsettling ceremony broadcast on Raw that same April. He professed that a secretive, higher power was the true mastermind, manipulating the ministry's actions from behind the scenes. The wedding was ultimately thwarted by Stone Cold, setting the stage for yet another championship showdown between the two rivals at Over the Edge. On that fateful evening, The Undertaker successfully captured his third WWE Championship. Just 2 weeks after his victory, the shocking truth was unveiled. Vince McMahon had been the enigmatic higher power from the very beginning. To this day, many fans regard this revelation as one of the most poorly conceived plot twists in the company's history. His tenure as champion, however, proved to be quite short-lived. During the June 28th episode of Raw, in a segment that shattered viewership records for the company at the time, Stone Cold reclaimed the championship title. Following this defeat, the Ministry of Darkness disintegrated, and The Undertaker formed a new partnership with The Big Show, mentoring the younger giant. Their alliance proved successful as they managed to secure the tag team titles on 2 separate occasions. Throughout this period, The Undertaker's on-screen appearance began to shed its dark priest persona, gradually mirroring his actual off-screen identity. Fellow wrestler Kevin Nash has alleged that this transformation was a result of The Undertaker preparing to defect to the rival promotion, WCW. This claim, however, seems highly improbable considering WCW's well-documented troubles at the time and The Undertaker's renowned loyalty to his company. Regardless of the true motivation, he took a hiatus from performing in September of 1999 to recover from a nagging groin injury and to marry his second wife, Sarah. Upon his highly anticipated return at the Judgment Day pay-per-view in May of 2000, audiences were introduced to a radically reinvented Undertaker, the American Badass. The deadman persona was completely gone, supplanted by a trash-talking, no-nonsense biker who made his entrance roaring to the ring on a Harley-Davidson, clad in denim and leather. His entrance theme transitioned to Kid Rock's American Badass and was later updated to Limp Bizkit's smash hit, Rollin'. Despite it being a monumental shift in character, the fan base rapidly embraced this new iteration of The Undertaker, which injected a much-needed burst of vitality into a persona that could have easily become stagnant years prior. This fresh approach arguably made him an even more formidable presence in the ring. Following a brief conflict with his brother Kane, the two once again joined forces to reform the legendary Brothers of Destruction. As a singles competitor, now liberated from the constraints of his former supernatural character, he was at long last able to showcase his full potential, resulting in him producing spectacular matches against top-tier superstars such as Kurt Angle, The Rock, and Triple H. His intense rivalry with Triple H culminated in what many fans believe to be his greatest WrestleMania performance to date, pushing his undefeated streak to 9-0 at WrestleMania 17. Astonishingly, it was only around this point in his career that someone behind the scenes actually pointed out his unblemished record at WrestleMania. Although the streak would become a deliberate and central part of his character, those initial 9 victories were purely coincidental. In the lead-up to his next WrestleMania appearance, he remained incredibly active. He and Kane captured the Tag Team Championships on the April 19th edition of SmackDown and entered into a heated feud with the dominant alliance of Steve Austin and Triple H, known as the two-man power trip. What followed next was the infamous WCW Invasion storyline, an ambitious angle that would ultimately prove to be a major disappointment for nearly the entire audience. Throughout the Invasion arc, he engaged in largely forgettable rivalries with Diamond Dallas Page, whose credibility was severely damaged, and Chronic, which culminated in one of the most poorly received tag team matches in history. A rare highlight from this era was his victory alongside Kane to claim the WCW tag team titles, and his pivotal role in securing the ultimate victory for his company at Survivor Series that November. Away from the squared circle, his personal life flourished, as he and his wife Sarah celebrated the births of their two daughters, Chasey and Gracie. In the meantime, once the Invasion storyline concluded, he shocked the fan base by once again embracing a villainous role, adopting the moniker Big Evil. His new persona was centered on being the undisputed toughest man in the locker room, openly challenging anyone who dared to question his dominance. During the 2002 Royal Rumble, the entire wrestling world was left stunned when the rookie sensation Maven managed to eliminate the legendary Phenom. Rather than sabotaging the up-and-comer's career, The Undertaker masterfully turned the surprising moment into an opportunity to elevate Maven, a testament to the immense respect he commanded behind the scenes. His well-known generosity toward up-and-coming talent was rewarded when he secured a dream encounter with Ric Flair at WrestleMania 18, a monumental event where he extended his legendary streak to a perfect 10-0. The inaugural WWE draft saw him become a cornerstone of the Raw brand, where he wasted little time in defeating the iconic Hulk Hogan to claim the undisputed championship. In his role as champion, he defended the prestigious title across both major shows and dedicated himself to elevating emerging talents, including the high-flying Jeff Hardy. His championship reign came to a dramatic conclusion that July at Vengeance, where The Rock emerged victorious from a thrilling triple threat encounter that also featured the formidable Kurt Angle. After relinquishing the championship, he transitioned to the SmackDown brand and played a pivotal role in establishing Brock Lesnar as a dominant force, culminating in a brutal Hell in a Cell match at No Mercy that October. A contest so intense it was contained entirely within the steel structure. Following that grueling encounter, he took a well-deserved hiatus from the ring, making his return early 2003 to mentor the newcomer Nathan Jones, grooming him for a planned WrestleMania 19 tag team bout against the colossal duo of Big Show and A-Train. However, those plans were abruptly scrapped when it became painfully obvious that Jones was not yet prepared for the high-pressure television environment. Consequently, The Undertaker was forced to compete alone at WrestleMania, where he impressively defeated both of his opponents to push his streak to 11-0. But the audience was growing impatient. They were clamoring for the return of the classic Deadman persona. Having grown weary of his biker character, he dedicated the remainder of 2003 to producing high-quality matches against John Cena, Kurt Angle, and Brock Lesnar, before ultimately being defeated by Vince McMahon in a shocking Buried Alive match at Survivor Series that November. This symbolic defeat provided him with the necessary time away to completely reevaluate his on-screen character and privately mourn the recent passing of his father. Upon his heralded return at WrestleMania 20 in March of 2004, the fans received exactly what they had been hoping for. The Deadman had returned, but he came back with an intriguing new edge. This updated version of the character skillfully blended his supernatural origins with the hard-hitting attitude of his biker persona, which allowed him to continue delivering incredible in-ring performances. Reunited with his iconic manager, Paul Bearer, he vanquished his brother Kane for a second time on the grandest stage, extending his monumental streak to 12-0. Following WrestleMania, he continued his alliance with Paul Bearer while engaging in heated rivalries with the Dudley Boys, JBL, and Randy Orton. The Orton feud would set the stage for WrestleMania 21, where the streak evolved into a central storyline. Given Orton's compelling legend killer gimmick and his undeniable status as a rising superstar, a significant portion of the audience genuinely believed he had a credible chance to finally end the streak. This pivotal match established the successful formula that would define his future WrestleMania encounters, a series of heart-stopping near falls that kept the audience on the edge of their seats until the very last moment. Ultimately, The Undertaker emerged victorious once more, pushing his record to a perfect 13-0. His in-ring work was also visibly improving, largely due to his burgeoning interest in mixed martial arts. He began incorporating legitimate submission holds like the gogoplata, which added a compelling new layer of realism to his bouts. The year 2005 involved him in a highly controversial feud with Muhammad Hassan, a storyline that was abruptly terminated after a terror-themed segment unfortunately aired on the very same day as the tragic London bombings. Following the cancellation of that storyline, he immediately reignited his intense rivalry with Randy Orton. This time, he surprisingly suffered defeats at the hands of Orton at both SummerSlam and No Mercy during that autumn season. After a month-long absence, he made a dramatic return at Survivor Series, demanding one final confrontation with Orton, this time to be settled inside the demonic Hell in a Cell. In the build-up to this climactic encounter, the supernatural elements of his character were brought back to the forefront in a major way. He engaged in unsettling mind games, such as seemingly possessing backstage interviewers to deliver cryptic messages. These psychological tactics proved effective as he decisively defeated Orton inside Hell in a Cell that December, bringing their feud to a definitive end. Seeking fresh competition as 2006 began, he set his sights on the Olympic gold medalist, Kurt Angle. In what was considered a rare display of vulnerability and respect, he was actually forced to tap out to Angle's signature ankle lock submission. The original plan for WrestleMania 22 was a rematch with Angle, a match in which Angle was reportedly slated to be the one to end the undefeated streak. Creative plans shifted, however. While Angle pursued the World Heavyweight title, The Undertaker faced Mark Henry in a relatively brief casket match, which he won to advance his streak to 14-0. Then a challenging period began. He was faced with the Herculean task of trying to produce a compelling match with the Great Khali, a challenge that proved insurmountable even for a legend of his caliber. Even though his reputation as an exceptional performer was firmly established, he was forced to endure these uninspired encounters at Judgment Day and on SmackDown later that August. Fortunes changed for the better when he entered a program with the brash Mr. Kennedy, a rivalry that consumed the remainder of the year and featured stipulations like First Blood and ambulance matches. The feud grew so intense that he even reunited with his brother Kane to form a powerful team against the duo of Kennedy and MVP. By 2007, he had a new goal: winning his first Royal Rumble. Entering at the coveted number 30 spot, he eventually found himself staring across the ring at Shawn Michaels in their first significant confrontation since the late 1990s. After a spectacular and lengthy back-and-forth battle with several nail-biting close calls, he at last managed to eliminate HBK, securing a championship opportunity against Batista for the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 23. That championship match absolutely delivered. Following 16 minutes of intense action, he accomplished two incredible feats. He kept his legendary streak alive at 15-0, and he captured the prestigious World Heavyweight Championship. This monumental victory marked the beginning of a golden era for the Phenom, a period of unparalleled success that would span the next 6 years. Throughout this time, his WrestleMania performances would consistently be the highlight of the show, further cementing the legend of the streak. His title reign lasted until May 11th, when Edge opportunistically cashed in his Money in the Bank contract to snatch the belt. This unexpected loss, however, served a practical purpose: allowing him crucial time off to recover from a legitimate bicep injury, which kept him away from television until September. He returned for a brief program against Mark Henry before reinserting himself into the title picture with Edge and Batista, competing in both a Hell in a Cell at Survivor Series and a triple threat at Armageddon, but was unsuccessful in his quest to recapture the gold. Still in pursuit of championship gold and new challenges, he was looking for. Aiming for another shot at the championship, he made a dramatic entrance into the 2008 Royal Rumble, drawing the unenviable #1 position and squaring off immediately against his legendary rival, Shawn Michaels, who came in at #2. In a reversal of fortunes, it was HBK who tasted sweet revenge this time around, ultimately tossing the Phenom over the top rope and ending his championship aspirations. Undeterred, The Undertaker rebounded with a vengeance just 1 month later, triumphing in a grueling Elimination Chamber match against a formidable lineup of Batista, Finlay, The Great Khali, MVP, and Big Daddy V, to secure his ticket for a WrestleMania showdown against Edge. On the grandest stage of WrestleMania 24, he delivered yet another instant classic, forcing Edge to submit after a hard-fought 24-minute battle to capture the World Heavyweight title and extend his unparalleled streak to 16-0. He successfully defended the championship against Edge at Backlash, but the contest was marred by the interference of Vicky Guerrero, which ultimately led to the title being declared vacant. Their intense rivalry raged on throughout the summer, reaching its spectacular and brutal conclusion at SummerSlam inside Hell in a Cell, when he chokeslammed Edge from atop a ladder, sending him crashing through the ring itself. After that decisive victory, he transitioned into new conflicts with giants like The Big Show and the high-flying Jeff Hardy, until a familiar foe, Shawn Michaels, stepped forward to issue a challenge. A fully convinced HBK believed he possessed the key to finally ending the streak, and their subsequent match at WrestleMania 25 was billed perfectly as a battle between heaven and hell. The imagery was unforgettable. Michaels, portraying a born-again Christian adorned in brilliant white, made a celestial descent from high above, while in stark contrast, the demonic Undertaker ominously ascended from the fiery depths below. What unfolded over the next 30 intense minutes is widely regarded by fans and critics alike as arguably the greatest professional wrestling match of all time. And after the dust settled, the dead man had advanced to 17-0. Following this monumental career achievement, he took a well-deserved 4-month hiatus to recuperate, returning with his sights set squarely on CM Punk's World Heavyweight Championship. His quest for the title was successful inside the demonic structure of Hell in a Cell that October, and he held the championship until the Elimination Chamber event the following February. That fateful night began with a terrifying accident, as a pyrotechnics mishap during his entrance severely burned his chest and face. It ended on an even worse note when a vengeful Shawn Michaels interfered, allowing Chris Jericho to steal his title. HBK had grown completely obsessed with earning a rematch after his prior loss. After failing to win the Royal Rumble, he took desperate measures, deliberately costing The Undertaker the championship just to force another confrontation. The Undertaker eventually relented and agreed to the proposed match. But he came back with one monumental condition of his own. If Shawn Michaels were to lose their match at WrestleMania 26, his legendary career would be forced into retirement. Their epic streak versus career match was set to headline the grand spectacle. In a performance that many fans argue even surpassed their first legendary encounter, the two icons battled for 24 unforgettable minutes. Ultimately, HBK's celebrated career came to an end as the streak reached an incredible 18-0. Once again, The Undertaker took an extended period away from the ring to allow his aging and battered body a chance to heal, returning to engage in a deeply personal feud with his storyline brother Kane over the World Heavyweight title. Fully aware that his own in-ring career was winding down, he chose to elevate Kane's status losing 3 consecutive pay-per-view matches before stepping away again for much-needed rotator cuff surgery. He managed to fight his way back to fitness in time for WrestleMania 27, where he was immediately challenged by Triple H, who was determined to avenge the career-ending loss of his best friend, Shawn Michaels. Although he was victorious, pushing his streak to 19-0, the aftermath of the match told a brand-new, ominous story. The dead man was so broken, he had to be helped from the ring, while Triple H walked out on his own 2 feet. This dramatic outcome perfectly set the stage for their inevitable rematch at WrestleMania 28, a monumental clash that was appropriately dubbed the end of an era. After spending an entire year away from competition, The Undertaker was set to confront Triple H one more time. This time, locked inside Hell in a Cell, with the retired HBK serving as the special guest referee. The narrative was crystal clear. With each passing year, the immense task of keeping the streak alive was becoming exponentially more difficult. For over 30 brutal minutes, the 3 of them wove an absolutely incredible story of resilience. Everyone in attendance truly believed the streak was finally over, after Undertaker somehow kicked out of a devastating sweet chin music and pedigree combination. But he miraculously survived to make it a perfect 20-0. The match was considered so emotionally resonant and physically perfect that fellow legend Mick Foley passionately pleaded with him to retire on that very spot, insisting that he could never possibly top that performance. However, that was advice he chose not to take. He proceeded to have another fantastic match the following year, defeating CM Punk at WrestleMania 29 to reach 21-0. Despite the victory, it was becoming undeniable that the toll of age was catching up with him. Following another year spent mostly away from the squared circle, he made his return at WrestleMania 30 to face the dominant force of Brock Lesnar. Absolutely no one believed Lesnar stood a chance of winning. It was widely assumed that the streak would eventually end to elevate a younger star into the spotlight. That belief is exactly why the entire arena fell into a state of stunned, deafening silence when Brock hit a third F5 and secured the pinfall. After nearly a quarter of a century, the streak was over. It was a moment in wrestling history akin to television's Red Wedding, proving once and for all that even the dead man was mortal. Brock Lesnar used that historic victory to solidify his status as the industry's ultimate final boss, a role he commands to this day. But the story of The Undertaker was not quite over. He returned at WrestleMania 31 to defeat the eerie Bray Wyatt, then followed it up with a surprisingly excellent and brutal Hell in a Cell match against Lesnar later that summer. By the time WrestleMania 32 rolled around, however, when he competed against Shane McMahon in a match many found disappointing, it was painfully clear his best days were far behind him. It became apparent to almost everyone watching that his time to retire had come. But out of profound respect for the legend, nobody would dare say it to his face. At this point, Mark Calaway himself knew that he had missed his window for a perfect exit, and developed an obsession with finding one last, truly great match to go out on. His body, however, was no longer cooperating with his will. At WrestleMania 33, his match against Roman Reigns was particularly difficult and uncomfortable to watch. The severe limitations caused by his bad hips made it abundantly clear to everyone that he should not have been competing at that high level. The following year, his highly anticipated match with John Cena lasted only 3 minutes due to his physical constraints. He attempted to get back into fighting shape for events in Saudi Arabia, but these appearances were even worse, especially a dangerous bout with Goldberg. While a tag team match pitting him and Kane against DX was a definite lowlight, he had a decent enough showing when he teamed with Roman Reigns against Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre at Extreme Rules 2019. But it still was not the epic send-off he was searching for. Finally, at WrestleMania 36, he received the perfect ending he had been chasing, in a unique contest against the phenomenal AJ Styles. The global pandemic forced them into a creative corner, resulting in the cinematic Boneyard match, which cleverly disguised his physical limitations while celebrating all the different eras of his character. It was a tribute to the iconic Deadman, the hard-riding American badass, and even offered a glimpse of the man himself, Mark Calaway. After winning the contest and bringing his final WrestleMania record to an unbelievable 25-2, he finally seemed at peace and ready to retire. His legacy secure among other icons like Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, and Roman Reigns. The marquee names of the company may have shifted over the years, but every last one of them ultimately had to venture into the dead man's foreboding domain. The top superstar of each successive generation was forced to learn the exact same difficult lesson. While they may have governed the landscape for a period, they were always trespassing in the Undertaker's yard. And that hallowed yard, a sacred battleground constructed upon 4 decades of darkness, unwavering respect, and an unparalleled legend, will eternally be his and his alone.